Christian community is God's ordained way of extending his love to his own people and to the world.
Welcome, everyone, to Breaking Bread, the podcast brought to you by Apostolic Christian Counseling and Family Services. It is great to have you along. Our topic today is going to be community and vulnerability, but before we get to that topic, I want to introduce our guests. Arlan Miller is not new to the show. Thanks, Arlan, for being here. Isaac Funk is, though, and Arlan, I want you to introduce Isaac, and we're glad to have him here with us.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. It is great to join again on Breaking Bread, and we are thankful for the chance to introduce Isaac Funk. Isaac Funk is the newest member of our team here at ACCFS. He is joining the church outreach group here. Isaac, why don't you just tell the audience just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm super happy to be on the ACCFS church outreach team, and I grew up in Peoria, Illinois, and married Elise Walbeezer in Peachtree City, Georgia. Elise and I moved down to Peachtree City in 2019 and have been heavily involved in some local discipleship programs there, and that's been a real passion of mine. I worked as an educator in the public schools for a while and have a real passion to form relationships and to really build up the body as much as I can.
And we're really excited to have him bring that passion and that experience and energy to the church outreach team as we seek to try to encourage help, hope, and growth amongst the brotherhood.
Which really has a lot to do with today's topic, in fact. Today we're going to talk about community and vulnerability. Let me just set it up this way. First, community and vulnerability are buzzwords. They're not just Christian words. These are words that are touted with esteem in our culture, right? Mm-hmm. And so we want to just really talk about community and vulnerability, and certainly seeing it through Christ's lens and what that means about the church. Because I'm going to go ahead and purport this. I'm going to say that Christ embodied community and vulnerability beautifully. He gathered around him a group of men and women and walked and did life with them. So it's very personal. Mm-hmm. And then we see Christ in the ultimate sign of vulnerability of his death, for example, was vulnerable to the nth degree, right? Mm-hmm. Made bare and exposed on the cross.
Yeah.
Okay. So Christ knows a thing or two about vulnerability. He knows a thing or two about community, and he lived them. And now these two terms are well thought of in and out of the church as things to contend for and things to do.
Yeah. And I think, Matt, part of it then speaks to the idea that these are core to who we are as human. We have a desire to belong. We have a desire to be part of something, which is an aspect that we can find in a community. And then we have a desire to be known, which is an aspect of vulnerability, where we are known for who we are. And so I think you see them heavy in society right now because that is speaking to heart desires of humans that want to be known and an aspect of who we are. When you think of community, Isaac, or when you think of this idea of belonging to something, being part of something, what comes to your mind, or what are some terms that you use when you...
Let's try to capture that concept.
Yeah.
When I think about what community would look like and the way that it's really gained a lot of attention in today's culture, we see kind of this dichotomy existing of people really wanting community, but not necessarily willing to give into community, if that makes any sense. In my mind, community requires an assuming of responsibility for another. And part of that it becomes vulnerability too, right? Becoming available to other people. And I think sometimes that's hard to press up against in culture, is this idea that if you really want community, if you really want to have that skin-on-skin interaction that Jesus had with his disciples, then it's going to take some self-sacrifice.
I think a great view of community is when we fly in an airplane. You look out the window and you will see communities, right?
Yeah.
And in those communities, they all have similar things. There's like a grain elevator, right? There's maybe a hospital, there's a school, and there's a neighborhood, and there's some businesses, there's a downtown. And they cluster together in supporting roles and needs, right?
Yeah.
That concept of dependency is there.
Yeah. And different people will play different roles in that community. Absolutely, that's part of it.
And I think that speaks to me a little bit of where the temptation is, or where a temptation can come into, to want to define community on our own terms. We have the ability somewhat, and I think increasingly more so, to go into life and create our own community how we want it to be. It's a reflection of what I want. And this idea of being vulnerable and being known and knowing others and the responsibility that then comes along with that, I think is another depth and a level of community where I take it out of my own hands and I put it in the hands of someone else.
So the key word that I heard from that, Arlan, is that responsibility.
Yeah.
I might throw another one out, stability.
Sure.
If a community is not stable, we're not going to be interested. Again, that flying over in the airplane, these are communities that endure. Mm-hmm. They don't die with a person. They endure through many generations. Mm. Isn't that something, right? Stability?
Mm-hmm. That's a great example, Matt. Stability gives us a sense of, I think, safety, which is another aspect of community as well, where we are to feel safe within that. And that safety then I think dovetails well with this idea of vulnerability. We become more vulnerable as we feel more safe.
When I think of the role that vulnerability plays in building that stable community, people need to be able to really be present with one another and pay attention to one another, if that makes sense. And I think I mean that in terms of listening rather than kind of bulldozing or talking, or the way that we can kind of manipulate people. And I think that that's what ends up happening in false communities and unstable communities, is there's a manipulation factor involved, a sizing up of other people in that community. And in order for one to truly be stable and healthy, that vulnerability will only come when people know that you're there to share with them in their whatever it is, in their grief, in their joy, to meet them where they are.
My mind goes to things like social media and some of the communities that you see built online, which in many ways are the opposite, I think, of what you were talking about, or don't go to the depth of what you were talking about there, Isaac, where you have this true responsibility and known and vulnerability and realness.
It's so easy in social media to put a face on, mm-hmm. right? And community is not about that. Mm-hmm. It really is that raw, mm-hmm. messy, slow knowing of one another, mm-hmm. and caring for one another.
I really liked presence. You said you have to be present with a person. Because I think with the more words that we can try to capture this concept, we start to see what it is not. Mm-hmm. Because some of these words really would describe a corporation. Right? State Farm has been around for generations, and there's many roles and dependency and stability and safety, right? Mm-hmm. But there is something to be said for presence being almost more important than the role. Mm-hmm. Follow me?
Yeah.
Let me explain with an example. Back when my grandmother was still living, we would have Thanksgiving at the nursing home. And she didn't bring anything. She didn't prepare a meal. She had no responsibilities. Mm-hmm. But we wouldn't think of celebrating Thanksgiving without her presence.
Right.
Her presence was everything. In fact, you might even say central to the whole event. Mm-hmm. What you start to capture now is what community is above and beyond the roles that we fill. And I think that's important.
There's something really deep and necessary about community and the way that God has made us to function as human beings and certainly as his people. And so it also makes me wonder, what is the difference that Christian community makes as opposed to these corporations, these military outfits, whatever it is? What makes Christian community different?
And I think that's exactly where we want to go, Isaac, because I would agree with you. A community has purpose above and beyond the safety it provides, the comfort it provides, the enjoyment it provides, right? Enjoyment is part of community.
Absolutely.
I mean, sharing meals is part of community. It's laughter and rejoicing and feasting and fasting and lamenting. All of these things are done in community. But I'd love to place our finger on the beauty of the Christian community. What does it do above and beyond the CrossFit community.
Or every single number of lodges. You go through some of those small towns, right? And you see, oh, there used to be an elk lodge or a moose lodge or all those things.
The
all
Legion. Yeah.
Men looking for community or women looking for community. What is the Christian community? What is the niche that speaks to?
The Christian community is God's ordained way of extending his love to his own people and to the world. And it's drawing from a resource other than our own self, other than our own flesh. And I think that any of us who find ourselves in an honest community find that we need something more than just ourselves to exist in that space and to do that well, to be able to be with other people in the way that they need us to be with them. And so the need to draw our life, to draw our resource from the Holy Spirit, I think sets it apart and enables it to do what no other group could possibly do, because it's not a human endeavor. It's a spiritual God endeavor, the community that he creates.
And I think it speaks that it's not, we can get to the mindset that community is an end of itself, that if we achieve a sense of brotherhood or bonding or that kind of thing, we've received it. But what I'm hearing you say, Isaac, is that true community actually points us deeper, because it's pointing us through the Spirit to God himself, or to a reflection of God's love for each other and for him, and to grow deeper into that. So it is a means to an end.
I think I really like that. And you even mentioned false community earlier in the conversation. I think it's important for us to identify what false community would be, or the false intent. You talked about manipulative. When the community becomes the God, could be a way that you would identify a cult, right?
If I were to engage with somebody in my choir community or something like that, I would be engaging with them on a different basis than I would somebody in my local church. And part of that comes from the reality is when I go to my brother or sister in the Lord, there's something at work there beyond just me and you, but it's actually me, you, and the Spirit between us. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer has a chapter about this in his book, Life Together, where he makes the case for Christian community being unique in that way, that it's never just me and you, but we have a mediator between us, and our life and our community is a reality by itself that exists in and through Jesus Christ.
Yeah. You know, I'll just, a personal testimony. I feel like I think the clearest when I'm in a community of believers in physical proximity, right? I'm at church, or I'm at, and I'm in among my brothers and sisters, I find myself thinking the clearest about life, about decisions, about trials, about temptations, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's that Holy Spirit, right, who is in that and among, right?
Yes.
Because I don't have that same clarity when I'm in the community of Walmart shoppers.
Right.
It doesn't clear things up for me. Right?
And it gives a different meaning to the scriptures when we read scriptures like we are to be members one of another, right? And we are part of this body. It takes it to a whole nother level, because if I'm not careful, I think I want to equate church or a community of even believers. I want to interact with them and relate to them like I do other community members or those I see down the street or whatever, coworkers, that kind of a thing. And what I'm hearing and what I really appreciate is a call to go deeper with that and to realize that this is a work of the Spirit amongst us that's pointing us to a closer relationship with God and revealing God himself, I think, in aspects of his character through the workings of the body there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is the place where God dwells. If you can't find him anywhere else, you will find him among his people, right? And we need that more than anything.
A wonderful part of the good news of the gospel is the community that God creates in his church. Isaac and Arlan have helped us see that in this episode. In the next episode, we're going to carry forward this concept and couple it now with vulnerability. I hope you can be with us.